There's a saying that goes, you can't choose family, which is a damn shame for Luffy because his family is this guy. Garp, as both a Marine and a member of the monkey family, contradictively exudes a desire to control much like the world government he fights for, but only in service to his willful and free-spirited desires, something common in all those with the D initial. He calls in a favor from a criminal, not arresting her as long as she raises Luffy and Ace. Despite not being present in their lives, he demanded of them that they become great Marines. There is a form of familial love in his bones, but it's conditional, and again, contradictive. Is his anger at Akainu after his execution of Ace truly justified? Both he and Luffy claim to love Ace, yet Garp stands between the two brothers. His love for his family is only a mild concession from his sense of justice at best. A pretend fall in battle to give Luffy the time he needs to reach Ace, or the promise that he'll be gentle in trying to arrest Luffy and condemn him to a fate to nipple down. A promise fulfilled as he fights by throwing cannonballs like rockets rather than getting up close and personal. This is a relationship of obligation, one that Luffy would rather be without, his free spirit not content to be tied down by a person who considers Luffy as secondary to his career at best. But as troubled as their relationship is, the kicker is that Garp still has some level of genuine love for Luffy, and as bogged down by ideological conflict as it is, it makes this obligated relationship of Garp's will being forced onto Luffy the single strongest blood relation any Straw Hat has with a living relative. Garp's intermittent visits are still much more than the likes of Yasopp or Dragon, the two well vanished from the lives of their sons. The purpose as a Marine he wanted Luffy to fulfill is at least in some regards considerate for his general well-being, whereas Chopper's herd readily cast him out to die. We at least know he's still alive, which is more than can be said of the never-seen families of Zoro, Nami, Frankie, or Brook. He's only surpassed by the likes of Banchina, Nico Olvia, or Vinsmoke Sora, but these dear mothers were not meant to last in this world. And next to the Vinsmokes, who wanted Sanji as a tool for their needs in amassing power, or Robin's neglectful uncle and aunt, Garp seems like a pretty alright guy after all. But Garp is not all Luffy has. None of them have ever been entirely alone. They may have brothers, though not in blood. Someone they are together with, in the sword, in construction, in the kitchen, in the trade, together under the flag, in ideals, young troublemakers and dreamers lumped in with each other, or just together as members of the same household. These families are not bound out of blood obligation, but out of a true love for one another, supplying each of the Straw Hats with a camaraderie they hadn't been able to get anywhere else. Well, almost. That's not entirely true, because each of them left that family to join the one bound by the Straw Hat flag. They did not always leave by choice, but leaving their past behind, figuratively or literally, was a necessity if their ambitions were to be met. And the best lens with which to examine this idea would be the one who not only never stopped chasing her goals even when stripped of what she would call family, but forced herself into the lives of the Straw Hats before she could be convinced to join, Nico Robin. Family was always a sore spot with the young Robin. What little she had barely acknowledged her existence, or was well out of her life. The O'Haran scholars gave her the first place she belonged, yet out of a desire for her safety, they could not bring her into the fold entirely, her reaction to being rejected stemming out of her desire for companions not being fulfilled despite all her efforts. This desire can be seen again when she finally meets her mother, the family she'd wanted for so long, to the point that she was willing to stay there and die with her as O'Hara was destroyed, rather than be separated from what she had been longing after for her entire life. But she was forced away, Saul getting her to safety, his dying words promising Robin that she would find what she was looking for someday. Her journey to find those who would become her family would be a rough one full of constant betrayal and the death of so many she'd fallen in with. The life that had been saved at the cost of everything she once held dear became a burden in an unexpected cycle, taking a great cost from everyone around her. She's shown to act defensively towards her best interests, prepared to be betrayed by Crocodile at any time, while showing an uncharacteristic whimsy when she appeals to the jovial Straw Hats. Her duplicitous nature acts as a barrier against the family she believes will be lost to her one day, so that she might not know the sting of such a great loss yet again. But the cycle was not meant to continue for much longer after meeting the Straw Hats. For their sakes, she sacrificed her own life of burden that would have brought their downfall either way, and by acting as the antagonist, she further cut them off. Had her plan worked, they would have been saved, not even knowing that Robin was acting for their benefit. She could rest knowing that they were safe, while they would have no guilt or sadness in losing her. But like she cared so much for them, they too cared for her, finding the truth through their meddling. When they learned that Robin was willing to offer her life for theirs, they can't agree with her choice. While she sees little value in her life of burden, Luffy doesn't. The crew doesn't. Her value to them had the Straw Hats doing the unthinkable in trying to reach her, proving through action that Robin's life was so much more valuable than she'd thought possible as they break down the barriers she put up, once for her safety, but now for theirs. With her decision recontextualized, what Robin had thought to be a small wish, one that she hadn't thought she'd been able to make before, finally became known through her choice. What started as a false appeal for a brief period of safety had become a genuine bond set to last a lifetime, that of a family, the one she'd been looking for her entire life. This is something that extends to all the Straw Hats. While their previous families were not the ones of their birth, they filled the same roles. Maybe they were raised under parental figures, maybe without, but they still took their drives and values from those around them. And the young bird must leave the nest one day. It's not easy. It's never easy. With such strong bonds holding them back, with such heavy burdens tying them down, Luffy does not acquire his crew so much as he earns them, showing through his actions that a life under the Straw Hat flag is the one for them, and their ambitions too big for their previous family, whether they can't help to meet those ambitions, or because that family already achieved their own dreams and have no room for something greater. When the child is raised, the next step is to go out on their own. Through their histories of tragedy, so many of the Straw Hats have not truly started their lives even as adults, yet they all choose to go forward when the time is right. It's these youthful steps in going out to fulfill a grand ambition that are the catalyst for the equally grand adventure of One Piece. These themes a crucial aspect in the worldwide appeal of the series. But this gradual build-up and exploration of family on a thematic level has largely been secondary or in tandem to other ideas, until recently when they've been given more intricate commentary and exploration. Whole Cake Island represents One Piece at the strongest the series has been since the Paramount War, in no small part thanks to Big Mom and the Charlotte family, a collection of some of the most colorful and compelling antagonists in the series. However, over the course of the arc's run, a number of character actions have been called into question as being forced or otherwise for plot convenience, yet many of these actions become clear with the understanding and application of the familial themes, perfectly natural given the conflict of family against family, in so many ways. When looking at the Charlotte family next to the Straw Hats, it's almost difficult to call them a family in the same sense of the word. Aside from their positions in a true dynasty that has power throughout the world, they are largely tied together by their connections to their mother and her great dream, to unite the races in a land free of discrimination. It's a goodly goal unfitting the clan of brutal killers, who not only accept murder and betrayal easily, but don't even follow this dream through example. Not even Big Mom does. Biological traits are fair game for verbal harassment and ridicule, leaving daughter, son, and sibling alike as vulnerable based on a physical trait they are in no control of. This contradiction further makes even less sense in this setting, where humans can vary in such drastic ways, and non-human races like fishmen and merfolk exist to be victims of fear, suspicion, or outright persecution. Two key points to consider in approaching this dilemma are as such: the childishness of this discrimination method, and Big Mom herself. To call Pudding a freak for having 3 eyes, or say Katakuri is like a gulper eel for his large mouth, is not even something that can really be called an insult. Yet as these two hide their offending attribute in casual wear, there's been an undeniable effect on them psychologically. By referring to appearance, something objective and undeniable, as negative, the victim of the insult has no real power against the offender. They can't easily change once outed as different, so their only defense is to cover themselves, forced to save face for the family who won't allow them to be vulnerable. But in particular, this uncreative form of attack has a notable similarity to the types of insults one might hear tossed between children that make as little sense in reality. Skinny, fat, tall, short. Any of these are completely normal traits in a child, especially with the variance of puberty, yet they are still grounds for harassment and ridicule regardless of how much sense it makes. It's that childishness of it all that I want to stress. These are adult characters who never let go of that schoolyard level teasing that's been burdening them since childhood. And all because the childishness of the Charlotte family stems from the one equated to actual children in mocking Pudding's third eye, Big Mom. From the age of 5, the young Lin was absurdly powerful, yet also a genuinely kind and thoughtful young girl. Like any normal kid, she was prone to making mistakes or acting out, but due to her strength, there was no way to reprimand her properly, creating a fear in those who might have scolded her. Her parents, lacking the ability to deal with her, abandoned the young girl, and she was found by Carmel, the first person to understand Lin. But while she was able to understand that Lin meant no harm by her strength, she only encouraged her childish behavior through justifying it, and was unable to tell her when and why she was wrong, else Carmel would risk incredible danger from the frustrated child, called Demon by the incredibly strong Elbaf giants after her tantrums. And so, after Carmel vanished, Lin was left alone, taking Carmel's influence, but no longer having a real authority except herself. And 63 years later, she's still big, still strong, still tantruming for food, and still possessing the exact same corruption of Carmel's dream. She is exactly as much of a child as she's ever been. Her desire to literally see all races eye to eye is that childish dream taken to its bizarre reality through someone powerful enough to see it realized, yet not smart enough to see the obvious flaws of her interpretation. She would never be contradicted by those around her. Her family has known her dream for most of their lives, and questioning Big Mom for any purpose is grounds for execution. Her actions may have led to horrific experimentation, yet the perceived purity of her goals gives her the moral high ground. As long as she seeks equality, she can do no wrong in her eyes. As silly as her desire is, her words are absolute. Totland is a domain where none can leave, even with Big Mom's blessing, unless they are willing to put their lives on the line through a rigged game, and as long as they live in her territory, anyone can be at risk for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unable to argue, unable to fight, unable to leave, liable to die at any time, power is something that Big Mom's family must struggle to keep, and the childish name-calling that gives them an edge over their siblings isn't even the only ridiculous way in which Big Mom's children rule power over each other. Early in the arc, Peckham's explains the laws of Totland, noting that while you can eat anything on Cocoa Island, the candy windows are under the jurisdiction of the Candy Minister, the biscuit pillars guarded by the laws of the Biscuit Minister. While it's a goofy gag to ground the idea of being able to freely eat houses through some silly rules and regulations, when we meet those ministers later and more fully grasp the nature of Totland's ruling family, we can see the elements of characterization at work here. The two-faced Pudding, who's known by her likable facade, allows any chocolate to be eaten except the roofing, for weather reasons, giving her the appearance of a kind woman through lax regulations. And yet, Cracker and Perospero have some level of control in her territory. Though they are some of the most powerful members of the crew, they are still under Big Mom's oppressive rule, and their expression of control is yet another method in which they take what solace they can in their subjection, by taking as much power as they can, even in small ways through their devil fruit abilities and the laws of the land. And no one questions it, as above them all is the biggest child leading by example. Big Mom wants her children to get along, yet doesn't scold them for their behavior. Big Mom not only modeled herself after Carmel through their respective dreams, but also in her approach to mothering. As Carmel understood Lin, she too tries to understand her children and allow them to continue to act as they please without being reprimanded. When told of Anana's predilection for stabbing stuffed animals and popping her brother's balloons, Big Mom laughs, insisting that everyone has a few hundred or so people they want to kill. Through excusing Anana's actions and feelings by connecting them to her own, she vindicates both, uncaringly allowing Anana to continue her sociopathic tendencies unchecked, while normalizing the idea of wishing death upon others, feeding a dangerous mindset while also, in turn, justifying her own horrible demeanor. What little non-discriminatory freedom she offers to her children is only in service to herself, and the moment it's violated, she has no mercy, wishing death upon Lola for having the audacity to marry the man of her choosing, abusing Chiffon simply for looking like her. It's such an easy choice for Big Mom to make because her actions hold no love. Luffy defeating Cracker is a grievous crime against the Big Mom pirates, as she tells Sanji, but even worse is that he dared to eat the candy made for her on Fishman Island. Food she'll devour in minutes is more valuable to her than decades-old children, and her selfishness betrays the bond of parent and child, creating a structure that was doomed to fail. Those failures have been pervasive, but among her biggest failures is Pudding, who so easily switched allegiances when she was called beautiful by the man she had just moments before been so eager to kill. But we can't quite jump into this discussion now. While this moment is among those criticized, it's also the latest turning point in the relationship between her and Sanji's huge level of importance to the arc warrants further discussion in itself, as Pudding's sudden switch was called into question by readers as much as Sanji's strained relations, which have even been dismissed as foolish or forced due to their similarity to Nico Robin's conflict so much earlier. If he's already been in the same situation from the other side, then why did he apparently make the same mistake? To start from the beginning, we're introduced to the Vinsmokes, Sanji's blood family. In an effort to arrange an alliance with Big Mom, they force Sanji into a wedding by holding Zeph hostage. In accepting, he would be forced away from the Straw Hat Pirates and his great ambition, but they would survive even as he remained with Pudding. Yet to deny them would put Baratier at risk, causing Sanji to lose the family who raised him into the man he is today. Never mind that the Straw Hats would be marked as an enemy by both Big Mom and the Vinsmokes. Even had he chosen to risk Zeph's life in exchange for his own, the explosive bracelets placed on him forced his hand. Were Luffy to free him, then he'd lose his ability to function as a cook, and thus the only reason he had to go along with Luffy. Without his hands, he couldn't help Luffy become Pirate King, nor would finding the All Blue be fulfilling to him, as he wouldn't be able to use its resources to make all the dishes he could dream of. Torn between 4 families and unable to easily help any of the ones he cares about, Sanji takes the course of action that would best keep everyone alive, even if that means fighting his captain. This lack of trust in Luffy's ability to save the day is where the Robin comparison is drawn, but with the full scenario in mind, we can see the nuance separating their choices. Robin made what she felt to be the best, easiest choice: to lose her life, the one she held little meaning in, to save the one family she had left, and her mind was changed when Luffy gave her an option she'd never have considered worth the risk on her own. But Sanji had no choice. As far as he knew, going along with Luffy would leave him as deadweight at best, and risk his life in battle with Big Mom at worst. Because he can't properly explain the situation, Luffy's stubbornness put him in a difficult spot that trying to get out of would only compromise everything he was trying to protect. Robin took what she felt would be the easiest option, but Sanji had no option. Even directly following this conflict, Sanji is not punished for his choice. Consider his first meetings with Pudding and Big Mom. Big Mom promises to let Luffy go out of a favor to Sanji, and Pudding is downright lovable. Sanji has a history of being able to see through the lies of women, but it might be more accurate to say he's able to see the best in them, even when they purposely deceive. When he agrees to marry Pudding, there is the hope that everything will be alright. Zeph will live. Luffy will live. The Vinsmokes will be off his back once they get their alliance. And Big Mom doesn't seem all that bad, considering she's willing to let Luffy and the crew off with a warning despite their transgressions. He left Zeph for the Straw Hats, and by letting himself see the best in Pudding and Big Mom, he comes to the conclusion that maybe he can find another family here. But it isn't meant to be. The Charlotte family isn't as bad as the Vinsmokes. They're worse. So much worse. He wanted to save everyone, but in trying to save all his family alone, he very nearly lost everything. It's only when those hopes are dashed does Sanji, lost, go back to his captain. As a man so easily able to connect to others, he's just as easily able to understand Sanji's dilemma in trying to keep everyone alive, and just as willing to throw his life on the line to save everything that Sanji wants to protect. Luffy understands everything immediately, and through relying on his family, Sanji is then able to save everyone he cares about and unite them together, even the villainous Vinsmokes, as awful as they've been to him. Attempting to sacrifice himself so that he could save everyone he cares about, rather than relying on others, is something he's tried before, and seen others done for him. So it's only the natural decision, as Sanji is a man that can be defined by love. To say his choice is as easy as Robin's and his conflict force is just dismissive of who he really is, the type of person to look for the good in a woman who doesn't seem to have any, the type of person to call Pudding beautiful, even as she and her family are poised to kill him and his. And these words stop her, because it's something she'd never heard before. It's not merely Pudding having what she sees as her worst attribute being called beautiful, but in what Sanji says to her as a person. Big Mom calls her a doll, an object with which to be used, either through her devil fruit, acting ability, her third eye, or simply as a woman to be married off for power. Pudding isn't a person to Big Mom. None of her children are. They are tools for her reign. Yet Sanji, practically a complete stranger, doesn't see her that way. And that is Big Mom's failing. In marrying off her children, she exposes them to the one thing she could never offer to them herself. Love. Genuine, heartfelt love. A love that has Praline joyfully jumping to betray their mother, or Chiffon feeling no emotion at the idea of her mother being assassinated. Pudding's complex about her eye left her unable to see it as anything other than disgusting at worst, or a tool for her mother at best. But Sanji looked past that, and helped her to realize how much she was missing in letting herself be a tool for her family, rather than a person that can be valued and loved for more than just her capabilities. But the daughters are not the only children of Big Moms to find themselves failing to live up to her through connection with the Straw Hats, even if that connection is one born through conflict. Charlotte Katakuri is the golden child of the family, with the highest bounty given in the series yet, undying admiration from his siblings, and an impeccable host of abilities that give him the reputation of looking down on the ground itself for being too far below him. In almost every regard, he is Luffy's better. His mochi abilities match Luffy's standard powers 2-to-1. His observation exceeds him. His armament exceeds him. While both possess Conqueror's Haki, Katakuri has awakened his fruit while Luffy has not. He treats sibling and servant well, whereas Luffy so easily slips into whining or being inconsiderate of his crew. He's not sadistic in battle, shining among his brothers and sisters who so often slip into cruelty. He looks down on his opponents, but Luffy is no stranger to this either, having spent the first half of the series treating his opponents like they were jokes. But even with such a greatness beyond the hero of our story, the one mar in his perfection, his slovenly method of relaxation, is still nothing to Luffy's ravenous appetite. But that one flaw is everything to Katakuri. When his face is uncovered in service of his despicable eating habits, he kills the chefs who he'd been nothing but respectful to before. And it's not an unjustified reaction, not in the Charlotte family. Flampe goes from his #1 fan to spitting on his face. Without his perceived perfection, the siblings he was willing to protect would turn on him in an instant. All his kindness and respect would be meaningless to his bitter and spiteful family, who would rather demean him to express power rather than try to understand him. Katakuri's position would be irreparably damaged unless he were to betray who he is by intimidating his detractors into submission through fear, being no different from his mother. All because he was born with his fanged mouth, something he was always powerless to deal with. It's so small. It's the smallest thing, and yet his flaws weigh so heavily on his shoulders that he does not dare fall. During battle with Luffy, he's bewildered as Luffy continues to get up, claiming that to be knocked down is a source of shame in itself. But that's not true. Luffy's fallen countless times, sometimes so hard he couldn't even bear it. It's only Katakuri who sees it that way, because for him, any type of fall, small or large, would carry the same weight in the endless shame he would receive from his family. The two are so similar, yet while Luffy is below him in so many ways, Katakuri makes a concession during their battle because of the one area where Luffy surpasses him. Even when being knocked down from outside interference, he has no complaint and never stops getting up. When smashed, Mochi retains the shape it was pounded into, but rubber always bounces back, just like Luffy can bear to fail while Katakuri can't. Without having known the failure Luffy has, he's not able to resist nearly as much damage in their battle, and after the hours of conflict, they both fall. And yet, a brief period later, they both stand. For Luffy, it's just another exchange, and he's ready to continue the battle. But for Katakuri, it's a first. Never before has he fallen. While Katakuri is lower than he's ever been, Luffy, on that same level, is not only ready to keep fighting Katakuri, but the impossibly strong Big Mom and anyone else in the way of him becoming Pirate King if need be. All said without an ounce of hesitation. Katakuri might be better at seeing the future, but Luffy's ambition gives him the ability to look even further ahead without an ounce of haki, because his ability to fail gives him the greater drive to succeed. And so, unable to stand against Luffy, Katakuri falls, his ability to get up so much less even though they once stood at the same level. Katakuri lost. Not just from making a concession, but because while Luffy bears so many more flaws, as much as they are something to grow and move beyond, they still aren't enough to hold him back, because those around him have accepted those flaws as part of who he is. While for Katakuri, even the smallest imperfection is magnified, leading to a weight on his shoulders that he cannot truly bear as long as he remains connected to his family. Luffy is able to get up because his allies want him to, while Katakuri's effort to retain his bonds only weighed him down. Luffy's greatness will shine on another day, while Katakuri will never be noticed by the family around him even though he shines brighter. Had he been born in a different environment, he wouldn't have failed. He would have surpassed Luffy, surpassed even himself. Because if Charlotte Katakuri isn't good enough for the Big Mom Pirates, then there is no one in the world good enough for the Big Mom Pirates. Katakuri lost because of the toxic family environment that poisons the wonderland of food and delicacy around them. The same environment that led to Pudding falling for Sanji, that had Opera hiding the truth of Luffy's escape, and Smoothie covering up Jinbei's betrayal. The same one that had Bobbin casting aside help as he went after the escaped Sanji. These three were all held back by their fear of angering the matriarch, and brought the whole family to utter defeat as a result. Luffy didn't bring down Whole Cake Island, Big Mom did, by creating the weaknesses in which the ragtag bunch of pirates could utilize to cripple her empire. But Bobbin isn't blood. He's not a known member of the Charlotte family, and despite not necessarily being raised on Totland, he exemplifies the same attitudes and takes the same courses of actions as her captain's children. Big Mom's crew has so much blood in its ranks, yet it is not their blood that damns them, because all of these ideas follow the one core philosophy laid out over 800 chapters prior. Nami, in a spat with Nojiko, calls out their lack of a blood relation, angering Belmare, who slapped her, asking why those blood relations matter. Because they don't. The three love each other as deeply as any family, even without blood binding them, because in a real family, blood doesn't matter. Belmare's household, Robin and Olvia, the Straw Hats, even the Big Mom Pirates, none of these are defined by their blood ties or lack thereof. Blood doesn't matter. They're defined by their love. Like Bobbin acted consistently with Big Mom's real children, Sanji too has no distinction of blood with who he considers family. In his flashback, we see him take food to his mother Sora. He drops it in the rain, but she eats it happily regardless. Then, so many years later, he goes to take food to Luffy, dropping it in the rain, but he too eats it happily. They're the parents who formed the families Sanji was part of. And as he treats them to a meal cooked from his heart, they reciprocate in the same way. Because they are family. Blood doesn't matter. The saying goes that you can't choose family, but this is wrong. You cannot choose your blood relatives, but you can choose family. Back in Alabasta, Vivi gave her tearful goodbye to the Straw Hats, a goodbye she had to make because she did not choose them. She chose her kingdom, its people, her father. The kingdom of Alabasta is the family that comes first to her, and the Straw Hats accepted her choice in the form of their silent farewell, the mark on their arms representing their continuing bond. Big Mom's family is not worse because they were born together, but because Big Mom does not allow them to make the choices they need to, and those who do so at a great risk to their lives. An ideal world would have every family like the Straw Hats. Understanding, willing to defend one another, and willing to accept someone's choice not to be with them. But all too often there are families together by a sense of obligation and nothing else. No family should have such tenuous ties. Blood is secondary. A family tied by blood can be just as loving or as hateful as one without those ties. And sometimes that needs to be fought for. Luffy fights against his blood relations, against those who would tear his family apart, against the world. Anything he needs to do to keep not merely his friends, but his family. And they would go to those same lengths for him. Videos like this are made possible with the help of my patrons such as Mathwiz, Volkyon, Peter Cairns, Garrison Dunn, and Mohammed Hakim.